awful. Oh, you didn't tag me, you bastard.
Well, you didn't tag me. Okay. This is actually your fault.
Yeah, I am a trendsetter, man. It's the curse.
If you would have done what you said, then yeah, we wouldn't be in this position. You wouldn't see my like so horribly rushed.
This thing looks awful.
I told
your phone looks like it's drunk. It's got like a drunk blurry vision.
Oh, I told you it was going to be bad. I told you it was really bad.
Nah, it's all good, man.
All right. Well, I think we're live. That says so.
Are we?
All right, cool.
Yeah. My bad. Well. Matt, would you like to introduce your podcast?
Oh, sure. This is The Dead, and attempting to, the attempt at resurrecting Against the Mob podcast. It is entirely my fault that Against the Mob has not been publishing episodes. We've recorded so many episodes in the last year, and it's just entirely my fault that there are no new episodes. They live on my computer. There's actually been some fantastic episodes that we've recorded, and now they're just so out of date and out of context that I don't know. I guess I don't know. But this is we're switching to live stream because I think this is a way to help get episodes out in a timely manner without having to rely on the filter, which is me.
Absolutely. And it's also why today we are not going to be talking about what's happening today, just in case something bad happened and it didn't go up. That way it'll still be timely. There's nothing worse than recording some absolute fucking fire about like the Ukraine invasion on day one, but then it's not uploaded for like 3 weeks. And then you just sound like you're like a broken record repeating shit that other people have said, even though when you said it, you were first.
Yeah, I've done you and Logan dirty. And I have to apologize for that. You guys have given me some solid hours of your life, and I've just not met my obligations.
I thought the Trump shooting one was like really good.
That was so good, dude.
And that was like what, maybe a day or two after the shoot? No, it was probably 2 or 3 days later.
It was a couple of days.
You upload it now, people are like, yeah, bro, we've heard all of this. We've got updated conspiracy theories, man.
Yeah. You're totally right.
It's all good. I'll stop ragging on you because, who wants to sit through 5 minutes of just the Matty B punishment hour? So instead, I'll introduce myself. My name is Flirt Cheap. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and everywhere else. Just type it in Google, you'll find me. And today, we're going to be interviewing Matt about a subject that he is a leading expert on, an international historian. He could have gotten his PhD and gone pro, but he was just like, I've got too much to give to the world to spend this much time in academia. So instead, we've got him here. And as y'all can see from the title of this video, we're talking about the dark secrets of Yugoslavia and its formation and its collapse. And with that, Matt, I'd like to ask you to take us away and give everyone like a brief background about like what Yugoslavia is before it collapsed.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different places to start. The short version of this is that Yugoslavia is a multi-ethnic country that was formed after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and it has a lot of parallels to America today. Now, I want to start with that I hate the saying that history repeats itself because it doesn't, but it often rhymes. And I can't remember who said that quote, but the whole idea of like, oh, well, history just continues to repeat. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like, things only happen once with those certain people, places, times, figures, and then the timeline moves on. But often there is a certain flavor that tends to resonate through the narrative. And so looking at Yugoslavia and how it came about, and then the parallels that we can draw to America, I think there's a lot of fodder here. So once again, like short, very big overview, right? Follow the collapse of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War II or end of World War I. They create what is known as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Fast forward, the Nazis invade it, which is where you start to see a lot of the ethnic tensions that grow to become what we know as like the Bosnian genocide and the conflict in Yugoslavia, because the Albanians, who are primarily Muslim in their religion, are massive collaborators with the Nazis as they after they take over the area. And so there's a lot of deep hatred for there's a lot of deep hatred of the Serbs who are Christian for against the Albanians. And that's really where you start to see some of this some of the context set. There's also a very interesting battle that is lost to history. It's the Battle of Kosovo, and it happens in 1389, I want to say. Let me see, I think I wrote this down. Oh, it is 1389. And it's when the Ottomans are attempting to conquer that part of the world and bring it into the Ottoman Empire, and they lose this battle. And there's a prophecy that emerges from this battle that one day the Serbs will have a great nation. They will rise again and they will take vengeance against their Muslim conquerors. And it's super interesting that it takes 500 years for this prophecy to come full circle. What? What's so funny?
This is the kind of thing that only a Serbian would remember and quote to someone like 500 years later. Because, like, how many other people have said shit like that and then later, like, the I told you so moment happens, but no one remembered. No one, like, is
Right.
like that much of a just, I don't know, just Serbians are like the Scorpios of like any sort of nationality. They're just holding grudges, man, holding on to it. All of Southern Europe is Serbia, according to them. And then, here they go, like, oh, look, a dishwasher in the 1300s said that we would come back. And look, we have. Serbian
Here
national pride,
here
man.
we are, brother. Yeah, no, for sure. It runs deep, and it does run into the realm of absurd. And I think that I think that we should come back to this idea of like the myths of nations and how they impact the course of the people. And so continuing on this really quick overview, so you have two factions at the end of World War II. You have the Checheniks, and then you have this partisan group that's led by who eventually will become the dictator of Yugoslavia, Josip Tito. And so the partisans, they seize power, control of the capital. Checheniks flee. After the war, the Allies help round them up, send them back to Yugoslavia, and so then you have this really brutal period of reprisals at like late 1945 into 1946, where like tens of thousands of them and other political opponents are liquidated. And Tito is remembered as kind of this benevolent, good ruler because he helped keep the ethnic tensions down. But we like to gloss over the fact that at the very start of his, rise to power, he liquidated all of his political opponents. So it's easy to be viewed as the benevolent dictator when all of your opponents are dead.
It probably is, but it does bring up the question of like difficult choices. So, like, if you were the leader of a country and you've got like a trolley problem per se, and it's like you can kill tens of thousands of seemingly innocent people, or you can do nothing and watch ethnic genocide eventually grow within your borders. I think most people choose the liquidation route, even if it is like generally horrible. So maybe that's why people look back on it with such rosy lenses, because they were like, well, at least we're not like killing people in the streets because they look slightly different or they have longer noses or whatever the fuck the difference is between
Right.
these groups. And another thing that stands out to me thinking about this, like the idea of Yugoslavia as a country, kind of like lines up with the whole like big globo homo theory of just like let's mash all the countries together, big super country, large government. Maybe people will be united in multi-ethnic entities like this. And whether that's something that's possible or not remains to be seen. But Yugoslavia is kind of like an interesting example. Like, how many ethnic groups were in Yugoslavia? I don't even know, like five or
There
something.
are seven.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that Tito did really well that I won't devolve too much into is he kind of was he was an unofficial student of Bismarck in the sense of how he played realpolitik and being able to make sure that any decision that he made was to ensure a balance that was favorable to not only him but Yugoslavia as a whole. And so he's a very controversial figure in the sense that you do have a lot of blood on your hands. He has a lot of blood on his hands because of his actions, but he was also very instrumental in trying to implement this idea of a Yugoslav identity and trying to make sure that people looked at themselves as not Serbian, not Croatian, not Bosnian, not Albanian, but as a Yugoslav. And he actually did a really good job because he's a Croat, interestingly enough. And so he tries to do, and I think he does a wonderful job at trying to balance the power and making sure that no one ethnicity overtook and dominated the others. And so it is a really interesting example of how to play the game to make sure that tensions don't flare up, because what you get after his death, right? He dies in 1980, and this is where the I guess the pressure starts to cook a little bit. And so, during his reign, the country was pretty liberal by Eastern and Central European standards. They had freedom of movement, and he actually implemented something that was pretty interesting. And this is one of the parallels to the United States, where he believed in a central government, but he also believed in regional autonomy. So, we have federal government, but we also have state autonomy. Same thing. And so you have all of these different areas, right? You have Slovenia, you have Bosnia and Herzegovina, you have Croatia, you have Serbia, you have Albania, you have Montenegro, you have Macedonia, and then you also have these two autonomous regions, Kosovo and oh goodness, what's the other one?
Did you say
Vorodina,
Serbia? Oh,
Vorvodino, something like that. It's in the northern part of Serbia, but you have these autonomous regions and some sort of, um, freedom for them to assemble, to do what they want. It's pretty liberal, especially by, if you think of a communist nation in the 1970s, they're actually doing pretty well. Does that make sense?
a little bit. Seems like the trend of the benevolent dictator strikes again.
It,
The only type of long living dictator is one who's relatively benevolent. And I guess this is why when it broke up into these, like, I don't want to say they were like neat and tidy like lines, because from what I understand, the borders have still been changing even since the 1990s. But at least they kind of had an idea of how they had to break up, because it'd be a lot more difficult, I think, if they didn't even know where the lines were, who was who.
yeah. Absolutely, and you can think of it in the breakup as like state lines, you know what I mean? Where if the United States was to try to employ some sort of peaceful divorce, you could look at a border between Texas and Oklahoma and be like, all right, well, this is a reasonable place to draw the line since there's already a line there. Now, what that doesn't equate or take into consideration, just like all of the times that the Western powers post World War One are just ramming countries together and saying, "All right, well, you guys are all a group, and you guys are all a group," is the fluidity of nationality in these areas, right? So sometimes you do get these very homogenous divides, right? Like with the breakup of Czechoslovakia, it was like a 95% consensus of like, all right, this is where we should draw the border. We're Czechs, you guys are Slovaks. Let's draw it right here. Everyone good? Yep, everyone's good. Cool, cool. All those that are not so sure, please raise your hand and petition your appropriate governments, and we'll figure out how to compensate you for the troubles. You don't get that in Yugoslavia. You get so many. I mean, as we were talking before we hopped on, you get these ethnic ties, you get these neighborhoods, you get these enclaves of, well, there's Muslims here. Well, this is a primarily Christian city, but there's neighborhoods of Muslims. And then, oh, well, actually over here, there's some Albanians. And oh, wait, what's this pocket of Serbs doing in this city deep in Croatia? You know what I mean? So you get all of that type of stuff. And when the conflict starts, it's so hard to try to, like, how do you I guess before I even go into this, like, how do you break up a country peacefully? How, especially when you have so much intermingling, you have so much mix. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's something that's always bugged me about the concept of like a civil war in the US. Because, I joke about like which states I want on my side. Like, obviously, I'm taking Ohio with me. Maybe Florida, Kentucky, they'd be pretty cool. Alabama, Mississippi, they got to stay together. There's no way they could like split up. But like the reality is, like when you actually go into these places, there's pockets of all sorts of people who just don't want to be split up from the rest of the country. And there's people who might even fight over it if they were forced to decide in the kind of way that like happened in Yugoslavia. And it would just be ugly. I don't think there's any good way to actually like choose how you would split things up. Like the only thing, like I guess West Virginia would have an easy time like going whichever direction they wanted to go because it's a fairly like uniform state. Even Oklahoma, which is like 100% red county wise, not people wise, you'd think it would have an easy time like splitting up, but still, I think something like 30% of that state would not be on board, and 30% is a lot. Talking about like I don't know how many people live in Oklahoma. Like if it's a million people, that's 300,000. Maybe 10%
Yeah.
of those willing to fight over it. That's 30,000 people who would be willing to fight over something like that. That's not fun when you're talking about like partisans and not militias or anything, but just unaffiliated shooters or just random dudes with bombs. There was a video yesterday from Tel Aviv. I don't know if you saw it. This
Mm-mm.
dude was going to set off like a massive truck bomb, but I would say the Israelis got very lucky. The bomb detonated early, and the bomber was the only guy who died. But still, he's just a random dude in Tel Aviv. He's not anyone.
Right.
Maybe he's on a watch list, maybe not. But he was able to have the wherewithal to put together a fairly large bomb, get into a truck, and drive it into the center of the city without anyone stopping him. Like no one stopped him. The cops weren't after him. There was no authorities. His bomb just blew up early, and that was the difference between like I don't know dozens of people dying and a minor inconvenience where a street's blocked off. And having to deal with that here in the U.S., say if there was like 30,000 people like that in the city you lived in, it'd be awful. It'd be absolutely
Yeah.
awful. You'd be a victim of random violence, whether you wanted to be or not, whether you supported the cause or not. You don't know. Like, I mean, the dude with the bomb, he might have showed up to the grocery store like the day when all the Muslims were there. Would have been awful for him. But how can he tell? Like, unless they're like wearing like a hijab or uniforms, but citizens aren't wearing uniforms. Civilians, sorry, aren't wearing uniforms. So it would just be awful. I don't think there's a good way to split it. And from what I've heard about this breakup of Yugoslavia, it was genuinely awful. Do you have any history about how exactly this breakup started? Because I know the guy died in
Yeah.
1980. What happened next?
So you get this relative period of peace, so to speak, for about 7 years. And there's kind of a kickoff that historians now look back and say that this is probably where it starts. And so after the death of Tito, you have the rise of pretty much two strongmen. You have Milosevic from who's a Serb, and then you get this guy named Tudman from Croatia. And the president of Serbia sends Milosevic down to Kosovo, that is primarily they're Kosovar Albanian, so they're Muslim, and he sends Milosevic down for some sort of political thing that I can't remember, and the crowd there is very excited to see him. They kind of get unruly. It's unsure who does what first, but somebody throws the rock, the police answer with batons, and before you know it, there's kind of like this riot and a clash. And the representatives are urging him to, calm the crowd, say something, and instead he pulls one of these that ends up being like a rallying cry for the remainder of the war, and he says, and he yells, "No one should dare to beat you," and it only inflames the violence more.
What a
And,
chance. He sentenced the country to years of unrest and death and genocide, but what a Chad.
It's very fight, in kind of its essence. There are some parallels there.
Oh, that's a fair reference, man. I didn't even really think about that. Like, if this election here in the US goes like supremely sideways, people might look back at that, that photo that they banned from Facebook or whatever, might end up being in history books as like the moment the US started to break apart. Hopefully
Right.
things don't go sideways that way, but it is interesting to think about that because we were just memeing and in that other unreleased video where we talked about where we were when Trump got shot. It was a poignant moment for all of us, man. um okay, so this dude shows up and like fans the flames basically.
Yep.
Slobodan Milosevic, was that his name? I think I remember
Yep.
him.
That would be
um,
him. And so you
and,
have And so there's a period where they try to resolve this politically. They have votes. There's an attempt where national leader, or quote unquote national leaders, like leaders of regions, are trying to subdue the violence. They're trying to disperse the ethnic tensions that's now starting to really boil over, right? And I'm glossing over a ton of stuff, but think of it as like lots of little hot spots just popping up, all these little fires, right? And some of them are fanning into bigger fires that result in certain government officials being overthrown in favor of people that are sympathetic or stooges or allies of Milosevic. And it all just kind of it just starts to just boil over. They have some political referendums that try to solve some things. The Communist Party ends up getting kind of voted out, and now there's a ineffective coalition government across the entire country. And it fast forwarding to glossing over a lot of these little minor hot spots that start to go to the larger war. But in 1991, Croatia and Slovenia, they actually declare independence from Yugoslavia. So there's a very short 10-day war that ends with the retreat of the Yugoslavian army from Slovenia, and they abandon their claims on the territory. All right, cool. That one's nice and easy. The Croatian independence declaration of independence is a lot trickier, and there's a lot of strategic areas that that the Serbs don't want to give up. And this leaves poor little Bosnia in the middle of all of this, because like Bosnia is a true melting pot, right? You can look at Croatia and say like, okay, this is overwhelmingly Croat. You can look at Slovenia and say, okay, well, this is overwhelmingly Slovenia. You can look at Serbia and say, well, this is overwhelmingly Serbia. Well, Bosnia and Herzegovina in the middle is the melting pot of all three of them. And it's really hard to decipher. It is like the true melting pot of that country. And so these declarations of independence leave Bosnia in this tight place. And they feel that, well, if they declare independence, there's going to be this enclave of Serbs, these Bosnian Serbs that are going to demand to reintegrate into this project like Greater Serbia, is what Milosevic is pulling for now. Now that Slovenia's left, now he's like, well, this is Greater Serbia. And you have this feeling, well, it's like, well, if we don't, then what? But if we do, we have all these Serbs, and what are they going to do? Well, they're probably going to demand to become part of Serbia. And so Bosnia and Herzegovina declare independence, and that's exactly what happens. All of these Bosnian Serbs say, well, if you guys are going to break away, well, we want to be part of Serbia. And so that's where you really start to, so like that's the actual start of the conflict.
Gotcha, man. And when we were discussing this topic like this morning, the only real exposure I have to this topic is a book that I read a long time ago that I really love. And I was telling you about it before this, but just for everybody who's watching, it's The Dark Secrets of Shit Hits the Fan Survival. It's written by Selko Begovic, which you might notice is a name from someone who lives in that place. I don't know. I don't know which ethnicity he is. And
Very insightful.
But he was inside of Sarajevo, which I think was the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During the siege, and the city was under siege for like 4 fucking years, which is the longest modern siege of any city in like modern history. I think he said it was 1,400 days. And most of the book is about his time during the siege. It doesn't really talk about like the politics of what was going on. But like the foreword and the first few chapters, he's talking about the time before the siege started. And it was very interesting in how it struck me because he said that the media was like drumming up fear among everyone who lived there about what was going to happen, what the Serbs were going to do, what the Bosnians were going to do, what the Croats were going to do. And then there was like a lot of hatred being drummed up in the media. And at the time, he said that if it wasn't on the TV, he didn't believe it happened. And if it was on the TV, he did. Like he was very much bought into it. And he said a lot of the people around him were too. So like as these kind of tensions were getting ratcheted up among the ethnicities, it became like palpable to him even before the siege had ever started. It was to the point where he said he had watched several innocent people get killed by a group or by a mob, essentially, because the mob had convinced themselves that this is okay. And he said he was amazed at how quickly group consensus got to that point. Because it's something he'd never considered as possible before, because these are his friends, his neighbors, co-workers, people he sees at the grocery store, or whatever the communists called it. It's just a weird experience for him to suddenly have to view everyone around him as like a potential combatant or not like an ally. And apparently they declared independence in like October of '91, and by I think either February or April of 1992, that's when the siege began. The place was shelled. I'm gonna guess it was the Serbs who blockaded the Sarajevo, but yeah, okay,
It
I
is the
don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, it is the Serbs. There's also another really good book called Hearts Grown Brutal, which is it's Sagas of Sarajevo by a guy named Roger Cohen. And it is also a fantastic account of what happens. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is exactly the same thing. These people that had been neighbors. Now, this used to be a cheerful, peaceful city, and now nobody looks at each other. Nobody smiles and says good day anymore. And what's also really interesting is during this time, people start to retreat into ethnic enclaves where we only hang out with Muslims. We only hang out with our Christian brethren that are Serbs. We only hang out with our Christian brothers that are Bosnian. And it really starts to help propel that us versus them dynamic, which you need for genocides, And so moving forward, because I do want to keep going, but they, glossing over, right, you essentially get like this 80,000 man army um, that are armed and start the siege. And what happens, that's what follows next is what we know now today as the Bosnian genocide, where the Serbs were performing this systematic roundup of all military aged men in, not just in Sarajevo, but just Bosnia as a whole. And it's wild to see how many accounts there are and how they just stack up and they all kind of have the same ring. The Serbs came, they separated the women, the old men, and the children from the group. They rounded up every military age man, which was 16 to 60. They sent the women somewhere else, and then the men were never seen again. And these accounts are like, well, 160 died here, 140 died here, 2,000 died here, and it just stacks up to what will ultimately be like 100,000 plus deaths in a very short amount of time. And it's one of the most prolific experiences of gendercide that we've seen. It's like we've seen other things of genocide, but this is specifically targeting military aged men. Now, the women and the children aren't.
The most affected, weren't they?
Yeah, and it's like it's like not to say that the women and the children fared better. You know what I mean? There's still lots of atrocities going on in that front,
Yeah, I
but
can
you have
imagine.
this, yeah. And and there's a lot of history in there, but eventually the UN gets involved very poorly. That's when the uninvolved in
Yeah.
peace memes start, where they set up these enclaves in these like special security zones, but then the Serbs overrun that and massacre people. And there's actually a Secretary of State under George First Bush, Bush Senior. I can't remember his name, saying that it was bad for the Bosnians, but it's great for us. And I don't know the context in which he says this. You know what I mean? I don't understand the because that quote was in this book. It's like a comparative genocide book that I have from college, and it doesn't give much more context. So I'm really curious about the context in which he says that, because I don't know why an enclave being overrun is good for America. But that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
Maybe he was hoping that the country would become unified under one ethnicity once like the others were all gone. Makes diplomacy a bit easier if you're working in the State Department. But
That's fair.
I uh, I still don't know if I would say that if I was him. So maybe there's some other reason that he's got going on that just escapes both of us. Um, but still, when you talk about like the way these conflicts start to ratchet up, it always like worries is the wrong word. It's not that I'm worried. It's just like I see parallels sometimes, and it just it just kind of gets on my nerves sometimes. Like people don't want to hang out with certain people here in the U.S. because like which political party they're in, or they don't want to have certain friends, or they've stopped talking to their parents. And it's ratcheting all up in the same direction in a way that's definitely not good for us. And I don't know like how to undo that because again in this book he's talking about like the media was ratcheting up fear. People either thought they were going to lose something or was ratcheting up hatred, where people thought that they needed to take something. And both of these, maybe they were true, maybe they weren't. But like once an idea like that takes hold of someone, it's very hard to get them like back into like a place that could be considered like a centrist, and not in like the gay fencing centrist way, but in like the I'm
The
considering all
Chad
options.
Grilling type centrist.
Absolutely no virgins here, only Chads, brothers, only Chads.
Yeah,
But
no, that there's is sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna continue talking about it because something that it bugs me a lot, and I have friends and family members who are like this to some degree, not
Mm,
to an extreme degree, but I've only ever seen that trend going in one direction here in the U.S. I've never really seen it like softening or like really any sort of I don't know intention to reach across the aisle per se, and that's even the wrong way of saying it because it'd be nice if there were multiple aisles to reach across, which well, we
right.
already have. But that's also me going a little off topic here. Do
No,
you
I
want
actually
to?
think that that's no, I actually think that's a good way to keep going forward with the conversation because that's kind of the setup, right? I mean, there I could devolve into some very boring and deep rabbit holes of history that nobody except myself and the people that write about it actually care about. And I think just for the sake of this conversation, what you said is a good way to keep moving forward. And what we want to also talk about is kind of these parallels between Yugoslavia and America. And let me begin by saying that I do not think that America is Yugoslavia. How could we be? But I think that there's some parallels
America
that
is
are
Serbia, brother.
well, there's there might be some Serbs amongst us, you know what I mean? Um, and and what's really interesting to me as we dive into this is I'm not sure which side is which because the initial as we go through a lot of these, I think a lot of people's initial reaction is going to be like, "Oh, that's Donald Trump and the MAGA movement." But I don't always see it that way. And so at this point I'm not sure who the Serbs are and I'm not sure who the Croats are, and I'm not sure who the Slovenians are, and I'm not sure who the Bosnians are. It's very ambiguous at this point. I think that people will look into it to see what they want to see.
Well, maybe we need to have like a racial draft, man. I can represent the Serbians. I'll be Team Serbia. You can be whichever team loses, and we'll start picking people. And I think for the Serbians, our first pick is going to have to be the My Pillow guy. He's just so funny. All right, who you got as Bosnians? Who's your pick?
Oh man, like I don't even know. I'm so unprepared for this
Clock is
for
ticking,
this.
brother.
Well,
I
because
guess in
if you're
30 seconds, we're going to usurp your pick, brother.
I'm
And
taking
don't say
Elon.
Taylor Swift. Okay, okay.
I'm taking
Oh,
Elon.
okay. Well, we're taking Taylor Swift next for Team Serbia. I'm pretty sure she's got some Serbian genetics as well. She might have even participated in the genocide. Don't quote me on that, but I'm feeling.
Allegedly. We've got people looking into it.
She wrote a whole song about it, man. Didn't you remember? It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. That's a
As
Serbian song if I've
as she
ever
kicks
heard
down the door as a genocidaire. Wow. Holy shit, that gives that song like a complete different connotation.
Oh, absolutely, man. I only
Now
listen
I'm
to Taylor Swift with Serbian ears. I can't
mm,
even hear the American version anymore.
damn, that's fantastic. I think that you won with Mike Lindell and Taylor Swift. I think the draft's over.
Oh yeah, no, totally, dude. We're steamrolling all of New Jersey with this combination, brother.
I'd like to think that I could grab like some I don't know. I'd like to think that Andrew Cuomo might be useful.
Ooh, bro, I think he'd be pretty fire as a Bosnian, man. Because what was his quote? I'm not friendly, I'm Italian or whatever when he
Right.
accused
I'm not a rapist. I'm just Italian.
very Bosnian thing to say. And I think Bosnia would actually appreciate having a man that can like flip the script that quickly. Yeah, fantastic voice, brother.
All right. Well, let's take one more and move on.
Ooh, one more. Okay, Team Serbia. Let's see. We've got Mike Lindell and Taylor Swift. So we've already covered like quite a few bases. I think we're gonna take Kanye Swift's dentist as our third pick. Oh,
Did
you
you
don't
say
know the
Kanye Swift?
no Kanye. My bad. Kanye West's dentist. I was already dreaming of the wedding, and I just totally forgot. Of course, he's
Hmm.
taking her last name. You know,
Hmm.
he's really progressive, forward thinking like that. There's no real way she'd be like Taylor West. That just sounds retarded. But yeah,
That's
Kanye West dentist. He's going to be our third sleeper pick. Everybody needs a covert assassin, and that's our dude. Absolutely our dude. Have you seen the photos of him, by the way? He is,
which. Oh wait, of the dentist or of Kanye?
yes, yes, of his dentist, man.
No, I have not.
So there's this whole backstory to it. Apparently, he got Kanye West addicted to laughing gas, and the story, it seems fake. You're like, okay, sure, sure, and then you see a picture of the dentist. He's bald and covered in like tattoos. Like he has tattoos on his head too, like where his hair would be,
All
and he's
right.
jacked. And I'm like, really? This is his dentist? You went to
Kanye.
dentistry school? Really? Like, I'm not believing that shit for a second, man. He's totally a drug dealer. Are you pulling up the photos?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Yeah, dude, this is Team Serbia. With these three, I could take over at least 27 of the contiguous United States, which I think is realistically enough to, be coup proof per se, And then after that, we'll slowly go through the genocide of the weaker states. So, like I said, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, not New Hampshire because they're part of the 27, of course. Strong, love New Hampshire. Not Rhode Island either. They're not one of the weak U.S. states. Very strong. Who else? Indiana. No, they're on Team Serbia as well. Who would
Hmm.
be a Bosnian? Oh,
Um,
Colorado. Bosnia state right there.
New
Gone.
Mexico, pretty Bosnian.
I really don't even count New Mexico as like part of the U.S. Like y'all are, I don't know. I don't know what y'all are, but y'all are really a state.
All right, fine. I guess we're the autonomous region of Kosovo. Cool,
Look, I'm just
thanks.
saying. I'm just saying. When people cross the Mexican border and they're like, "I want to find a better life in America," Texas, Arizona, California, they don't cross in New Mexico. They're like, "I just left Mexico. Why would I go to Mexico again?"
No,
Doesn't make any
they
fucking
actually
sense.
do not. We don't have a huge immigration problem.
Not at
So,
all. Y'all don't have a border problem.
no, granted, we have a very small border, but still, it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fucking useless, man.
yeah, that's
But
fair.
sorry, I distracted with the little racial draft.
No, that's fine. I'm taking Andy Reid as my third pick.
Oh no! Oh, holy
So
shit!
I've got Elon Musk, Andrew Cuomo, and Andy Reid. I'm taking that as my like leadership for Greater Bosnia.
I think you just won the Midwest with those picks, dude. Like, I think I lost Ohio, genuinely do. Which sucks because they're always my number two like state as far as like who I want a civil war with. I don't know. Bosnia might actually end up with its own country here in the U.S. And hopefully, we're not listening to this 4 years in the future with like big ironic frowns on our faces about like, oh fuck, this shit actually happened.
Yeah,
Eating out of cans or like all the shit in this book. Actually, this book is like really fucked up. Like this dude just lived in Sarajevo for fucking 4 years while it's under siege. There's no food. There's no nothing. He said that like gangsters took over. They were just killing people at random. I forget which side he was on, but he lived like his house was on the front lines between two of the sides, and like there's a picture in it of his street that he lived on, and like you can see his house on the left side. The street's like 8 feet wide, and on the right is like a house of people who were on the other side. And like I don't know how you can like be prepped in a house and the front line is like outside of your door. There's
your
no
front
like
door.
supplies. Yeah, there's none of that. And like people were getting like murdered for shit they had, or if people thought you had shit, you got murdered. He said that he did some pretty dark shit in there, and that he had to start thinking in terms of common sense instead of in terms of like morals and ethics,
Oh,
which
absolutely.
is sure, sure, but it's like a fucked up thing to say out loud, Like if it's just common sense to murder your neighbor because he has like a gigantic store of water that hasn't been irradiated, then you just do it. I don't know if I'm ready for that, man. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't think a lot of people are. There is also, without getting like too far off track, but on that same subject, the if you ever read like the accounts of the survivors of Leningrad in World War II, they're absolutely some of the most horrific shit ever. And it shows what happens when a city is completely under siege and what happens when you can't get food in. And specifically the accounts of cannibalism are just overwhelming. Where and I mean, you have these accounts of feral children that just will never be integrated into society. Like they live in the rubble of Leningrad and they scurry out and grab something, or like a hand will be blown off and they run out and grab a hand and they scurry back into this rubble. And you have these gangs of children that will just never, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure that there is a history of what happened to them, but it's probably as like equally dark. They were probably like rounded up by the Soviet government and executed or sent to the gulags and disposed of. But I think that's a lot of this idea, and then this can shift us back to what we were talking about, this idea of conflict and how it's going to go. Like nobody, I think, is actually prepared for this. And so on some of those similarities, right? So and bear with me because this is something that I've been like toying with in my mind. So I'll play it out here with you. And so one of the big reasons that Yugoslavia actually does break up is you have this like fragmentation of the national identity. So under Joseph Tito, you have this like you're not a Bosnian, you're not Serb, you are a Yugoslav. And that had been suppressed quite well under the federal system that they had. But then once he dies, right, you have these greater calls for autonomy. And so there's we don't have the death of the strong man in America, right? Because we have a president. We don't have a dictator that's been around for 40, 50 years holding things together. So it's not a literal person, but something I've been chewing on is that there is now like we are witnessing the death of the myth of America. And what I mean by that is myths are necessary for social cohesion, right? Whether it be a family unit, a small community, a town, a state, a nation state, you need to tell yourself certain stories. And whether they be true or not doesn't matter. You have to have a myth that binds and creates some sort of cohesive glue to all of the people that are in that social group. And I think that what we've seen in the last 8, 10 years is the death of this myth of America. That the stories that we tell ourselves that this is what America actually is, it's now starting to be questioned. And I think that is what we are witnessing. Like, I think that with the death of the myth of America, it opens us up to that possibility of the political fragmentation and, I mean, potentially violence that leads with it. Because used to it's like I've been talking to a lot of older people about this. Okay, it's like, so grandma, when you were, in your 40s, how did you feel about presidential elections? And or any, you know what I mean? Talking to these older people, it's like, did you ever feel that if your candidate lost, the nation was at an existential risk? And I get overwhelmingly no. I wouldn't like that, right? She's like, well, I voted for this person, but Carter wasn't so bad. You know what I mean? Like you get answers like that, or well, I'm really glad that Ronald Reagan won, but or I'm glad that George Bush Senior won, but what's his name? Mondale wouldn't have been too bad, or Dukakis, that's who ran it. It's like, oh, but Dukakis probably wouldn't have been that bad. You get answers like that. But today, when you ask people about, okay, do you believe that if Donald Trump wins, America will cease to exist? I get so many yeses. And what's interesting is I get yeses on the other side too. That is like, do you think that if Kamala Harris wins, America will cease to exist? You know what I mean? So no longer is there this myth that it doesn't matter really who the president is because we're all Americans and we can rally around the flag and we share all of these national identities that actually make us a country. That is fragmenting.
I do wonder about something here. Do you think that when these people say these things, they're being dramatic and they're over dramatizing certain bad things, or do you think they genuinely believe it?
I think that the people that say it today genuinely believe it.
And that's kind of tough because, like, we had a Trump presidency. It wasn't that bad. It was chill. But we had a Biden presidency. Like, yeah, some things sucked, but like, okay,
Overall,
we're
right.
here. I don't understand my grocery bill anymore, but we're still here. Like, I mean, things
Facts.
aren't that different. Sure, there's like 10 million conflicts like worldwide going on right now, but we're still here. Um, I was on vacation like a week ago. Obviously, things are not that bad. Like they can't be. And you know, it just makes me think that people are being dramatic because like you just have to look back at the past. People who don't like Trump, you had 4 years of Trump. What really happened? I have no idea. We had 4 years of Biden, and like, yeah, I have an idea of things that happened because I was paying attention, but like, eh, and I hate saying because it could be better, but like, I'm kind of in the boat that your grandma was in, or like older people in general, where like
Yeah.
it sucked, but like it wasn't like the end of the world. And
Yeah, if I could try to stillman their argument, because I've been trying to understand it. The people that think that if Donald Trump gets elected, it is an existential threat to democracy, they base that off of the events of January 6th and all of the challenges, right? His pretty much attempt at refusing to leave office as they see it. And they are worried that in a second presidency, that he is going to, essentially deploy lawfare against all of his political opponents and won't leave office at the end. That's my best attempt to stillman their argument that at the end of 2028 he's just going to be like, "Oh, Constitution suspended. I'm staying. Call me Emperor Don." You know what I mean?
yeah, I understand the fear, but like from a day-to-day perspective, and like I get that, obviously you're not them. I just can't understand how someone can like go walk outside, go to work, come home, and think that like the federal government 3,000 miles away has like a gigantic impact on like that day. Like you didn't run into the government at all. I mean, except the subtle ways that libertarians will tell you you run into the government, which are totally true. But it's just out of sight, out of mind for so many people. And it's interesting too, because like I talk to people who like they're not politically aware or like in tune with anything that's going on, but like come election cycle, all of a sudden they've got like a huge opinion about it and like it's the end of the world. And then they go right back to either not being politically aware or just being like grievance merchants because their candidate didn't win but like still not really aware. And
Right.
it's weird to me because like even though like I would say on social media I talk about politics a lot, like in real life, like with my friends, family, I would never bring that shit up. It's boring as fuck. It has nothing to do with us. And it's always very weird to me when people have like organized so much of their personality around just people who live thousands of miles away. It's like cheering for a sports team, but worse. Because like at least with like my Vikings, the season ends and I can stop thinking about them for a little bit. you know? Like if
Well,
you're
I mean, the political season does end, the election ends, and then most people go back to, you know what I mean? Most people crawl back into their respective holes and they don't care. And that's always something interesting that I've noticed this election cycle as somebody that's been like a political junkie for years. People playing catch up on all of the things like, did you know all of this? Is like, yeah, dude, that story's like 2 years old. It's like, oh, you've just crawled out of your hole because there's an election in a couple of months. I gotcha. And I get where I think it is being exaggerated, but I think that plays back into this like the death of the myth, right? Like we told ourselves the story that you would always have a peaceful transfer of power, that it didn't matter who the president was, your life would continue, you know, at a relatively, with moderate fluctuations, but generally trending better. But now people don't believe that anymore. You have, and I think that there's some people that are being hyperbolic, but I think there's a huge chunk of the voting population that actually does believe, regardless of who wins, America's over. And I don't know how you sustain through that, right? Because you need the myth. You need that story that we tell ourselves. That it doesn't matter who the president is. People are overwhelmingly at not at at least not evil. I'm not going to say that people are overwhelmingly good by default, but most people I think can wake up and say like, "Oh, well, people aren't evil. My neighbors aren't trying to murder me." Um, but if you have the disillusion of that story that has effectively held a country together, you know what I mean? Like, think of the country of America. Think of how many different Americas there are. You talk about the land of the free, tell that to the 1.5 million people locked up. a large chunk of them for nonviolent crimes. Now,
I
granted
think
that
that's a myth, man.
what
Like,
what, what do you mean?
well, every time
But
I've really looked into it, when people get charged for like nonviolent crimes, usually it's like their eighth offense. They pled
there's
down on
also, I was
things.
actually going to say, there's a plea deal. A lot of nonviolent offenders plead down for that. That was the caveat I was about to say.
Oh,
Um,
that's fair. And I trust you know that stuff. So it's more of me just like, hey, listen here, liberals.
right,
But
I got you, libtard.
when I think about prisons, I feel like they're far more empty than they should be. Every single interaction I've ever had where I'm like calling a cop for something, they're just kind of like, we can't do anything about that guy, or he's already left the scene. What do you want, brother?
They're
We're not
far.
going to look at the video with the license plate on it. I'm sure that gun is going to a good home. It's just nonsense like that. Honestly, I've never called the cops and had them actually go do something. I've
That's
been
fair.
broken into, I've had cars broken into, I've had stuff stolen, I've watched people getting beat to complete shit, and literally I've never seen the cops do anything. And it's not to say that like the cops aren't doing things. I'm sure they're doing things all the time. It's just my personal experience is just like I can't be just bowling, a 37 completely unlucky and calling like the wrong cop every single time.
No,
So
you have a good point.
that's why like my apartment's covered in guns,
Yeah,
because
yeah, and
if
maybe,
it's
and well, I was gonna say maybe prisons are maybe not the best example, but I mean,
it's
just like
I
look
know
through history, right? Like you have this idea, like okay, it's said in the Declaration that all men are created equal, but yet it takes how many years? You know what I mean? Like those type of things. It's that dissonance that the reality on the ground doesn't match the ideals that we have, and to a certain degree, I think that that should be the case. Like our ideals should be better than the reality on the ground because it gives us something to strive for. But I that's what I mean when it's like the reality of America. You have as many realities of America as there are people, right? There's 330 million stories of what it means to be an American. But historically, you had an overwhelming narrative that bonded all of those people together, that we could say, well, even though the realities on the ground aren't this way, we believe in this America. And I think that that is dying. And so that I don't, so I think that's kind of one of those key that's one of those key indicators that we've had that lead me to believe we are trending in a Yugoslavia way. Is like, yeah, Tito's dead. The myth of like the stories that we tell ourselves about America, they're dead. Our fearless leader, our benevolent dictator, has abandoned us to the next life.
and that's fair. And sometimes, and this is going to be almost like counter to a lot of points I make. I think the media actually had like a very important job in maintaining this mythos. And either through the proliferation of the internet and this kind of like third party fact checkers that we have of just people on Twitter who are like real time debunking things that are being said, I think a lot of faith in media was lost, and with that faith we lost our mythos almost. Like even if we were all like believing the wrong shit, at least we were all believing the wrong shit together,
Right.
um, you know and maybe that's why people, when they went to their elections back in the day, they used to think it wasn't such a big deal if like either party won or lost, because both parties were running like uniparty shills. It was prison industrial complex running the government either way, and there was like that the Simpsons cartoon where the two aliens are running and they've got almost identical names, and they take off their suits and like it's a two-party system. You have to vote for one of us, Um, as the media has died, I think we've lost something precious that I think even we, like me personally, I'm like a dissident right wing, blah, 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 blah. I'm always quoting like, oh, you think you hate the media, you should hate them even more, blah, blah, blah. But I really should be mindful of what exactly it is we're losing, even if like the story that's being told to us is wrong. There is a lot of value in having a cohesive story that everyone agrees with, because like in this book for instance, he says if it was on the TV we all believed it, and if it wasn't on the TV we didn't think it happened. Like they had cohesion there. And with the loss of their strongman, I think the stories that were being told ended up playing on like ethnic concerns and fears, because you can tell one story and it scares one ethnicity and like incites another
Right.
one. And
Just like you can tell one story incites the right or the left, and you know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. And what he's telling me in the story, even though like he's totally fallen for the media, is that there was a just failure of media to maintain the solidarity that their communist strongman had given them. And I feel like we are in the same boat here, where our media has failed to maintain solidarity. And even if that solidarity came through lies, it did have a value of its own that we should at least be mindful of, like Chesterton's fence. Before you tear down a wall, you should be sure you know what it's protecting you from. And we, including me, have spent the last 10, I don't know, 15 years of life tearing down walls, feeling righteous about it. But look where we are. Is this better? Is it better to be honest in fucking hell, or is it better to tell lies in heaven? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one, but it's something to at least think about, maybe give a second thought to before we toss media out and make fun of Chris Cuomo, the Bosnian, and anyone else who might have been doing us a service that we were unaware of.
Yeah, there's something to that that I've been chewing on quite a bit as well, where it's not to say that it was good when you had one news source, right? Like you would get on, you would see what Walter Cronkite or Dan Rathers had to say. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that that was good, but to your point, I think that we should examine the benefits of it and the dangers that come when you don't have that, because media has always played a fantastic role in genocide. And think of, I mean, start like going down the list of these, more notable genocides. You can start with Nazi Germany. Well, propaganda machine, the media, right? Fuels a nation. You can go to as you've said, what's the media saying? You can look at the Rwandan genocide, and there's like, you can look at the rhetoric that's ramping up on the radio in the months before it actually breaks out, where the media is playing a clear role in stoking this fire. And the flip side of that is like, if you have a media, well, we do have a media, right? And there's responsibilities that come with that media. And if they use it properly, well, that's the best case scenario. But what happens when the media uses its unholy influence in negative ways, right? You get them fanning the flames. And one of the things that's kind of blown me away is that the media had no um I don't know, like introspective moment. It's like, huh, maybe we shouldn't have been calling Trump literally Hitler now that somebody took a shot at him. It's like, nope, Hitler still, like Trump still sucks. And they gloss on. And I wonder how much if historians, right, let's say that in this doomsday scenario, in 20 years after what pieces of America are left and have been rebuilt, and now you have some academic institutions that are now studying the breakup of America in the mid 2020s. Are they going to look back and be like, damn, look at all this footage of these guys just talking about how the other side literally Hitler and all of these other people want you know what I mean? I think that there's some parallels to that too, where you want the media to try to be like a moderator, in the sense where you want them to be like the most radical grilling centrist you've ever seen, that almost like to a fault refuse to take an opinion or a stance on anything and be like, well, this is just what happened today, but have you seen my new grilling chili cheeseburger, brother? It's pretty as fire. Like that's what you want from the media, but instead you get all this partisanship. And I think that there's a lot of trends, once again, right? If it's on the TV, it's true. I know a lot of people that way, and they tell me that it's like, I get my news from diversified sources. I watch MSNBC, CNBC, and CNN. It's like, oh, good for you, brother. Like, way to get outside your echo chamber and get some diverse opinions out there.
You know what's interesting too, when we talk about diverse opinions within media, um, it's kind of a bad thing. And like one of the best metaphors for it is the way that music has atomized in the last like 20 years. It used to be there were like national hits, and like everybody knew what the song was, and there was like a couple songs on the radio,
And now
and
the Rolling Stones' newest hit.
exactly,
Right.
everybody knew what the song was. And like now, as in terms of like national hits, like Taylor Swift is like the last like national artist to a sense, because like it's the last one that's like nationally recognizable, and that's only because she started singing like 2,000 years ago in like 2004 or whenever. She's my age, which means she's old as fuck. But like truly, there's like everyone listens to, I think SoundCloud was probably the problem. People started diversifying their sources of music. Nobody listens to the radio anymore. Like I don't listen to the radio.
Nope,
Everyone has
never.
like aux or a Bluetooth hookup. They're listening to their own thing now. And this atomization is good and bad. It's good in the sense that like you can really hone in and find like stuff that's true to you or unique to you. But it's bad in the sense that there is no longer just like national bops. Like whenever, like sometimes I'll go out to like bars or clubs around here, and they're always playing music from like the 2000s. They're never playing like anything newer because it's like really hard for people to agree on what's what.
Right.
And a lot of the music I've even listened to over the last like 3 or 4 years, it's all like really recent stuff that's just out of Texas because I live in Texas, and so I like find artists in Texas that I like, and so like all the new stuff I listen to. If I talk to people outside of Texas, they're kind of like, Sauce Twins, Mo3. I don't know, man. Who is that? Uh, and I think that loss of like a musical national identity kind of lines up with our loss of like a media focused national identity when it comes to news and this like American mythos. And obviously, I'm not going to tell anyone listening to this that you should go listen to the radio and rediscover America again, because it's probably going to be like complete trash on the radio. But still, you should listen and ponder about what we lost when you knew you could, like, say, go to New Jersey and they would know all the same songs. You could go to a club in Chicago and they're playing stuff you're familiar with. Anywhere in America you could go and you'd know what was going to be, what you'd hear if you listened to the radio. There was a single source for what's good and what's bad. And yeah, obviously I'm a fucking libertine who loves to make choices and whatnot. But maybe the communists were right, and we didn't need like 97 different types of ketchup in the grocery store. But instead of ketchup, it's political opinions.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
feel a country is actually benefited by that, and we're learning that the hard way. As much as I have championed everyone having their own nuanced opinion, fuck that, man.
Yeah, no, there's something to be said about that, and like this idea of like a national identity. You need stories to bind you to people, and you're right, we don't have them. I heard on Smirconish one day, this guy was he was a political science professor. I can't remember who he was, but he was talking about the need for a national figure because we don't have one anymore. And he suggested Ryan Seacrest, not because that he is the not because he's so popular, but he's like somebody that like everyone could just be like, he's okay. You know what I mean? Like nobody has very strong opinions on him one way or another. He's been around. He's got like a semi-trustworthy face. And so this guy was talking about like we need figures, like like we need to rally behind somebody like Ryan Seacrest, not because this guy is amazing and deserves to be rallied around, but because we lack that political and national identity in the form of entertainment. And so you need like kind of like a milk toast person that's just like everyone can be like, it's like I've never heard a strong opinion about him one way or the other. Someone's like, oh, I know who he is, or oh, I never heard the name, and then they find out what it is. Like, okay, that's cool. He's been calling the top 40 hits for the last 20 years. That's cool. You know what I mean? Like he's a very acceptable figure because somebody like Taylor Swift's very polarizing, right? Because you get people like me that just despise her
What?
so
You're
much.
not a Swifty, brother?
I'm not. Or even like more relevant, you get this split on like Drake and Kendrick. Which don't even get me started. I shouldn't have even brought that up. I just felt like my blood spike that anybody likes that fucking faggot from Toronto named Drake.
You
Can't
don't want to
stand
talk
it.
about implied pedophilia?
Damn. They not like us. That's all I gotta say.
Oh man. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. And like I think events like that are actually probably good for us, the whole like Drake Kendrick beef, because it does give us like a few things to like nationally look at. Because also like our attention cycle is like way too fast. Like too many things happen in any given year that people just move on like so fucking quick. Like who was it? The Jean Benet Ramsey murder. Do you remember that? Like 1996, this little girl got killed by a no, okay, so the original story
Uh-uh.
was that the parents, I don't know, they found her unresponsive in the basement or something like that, or I really don't remember. It's been a long time. But anyways, it was in the news cycle for a long time. It's this cute little like 6-year-old blonde girl. And they're like, who killed her? Who could it have possibly been? It happened in Colorado. This shit was in the news for like 4 or 5 months straight. It was like all the country talked about for like nearly half a year. And then we find out that like the dad killed her or someone related to her. I don't remember. I might be slandering the dad right now because like I genuinely don't remember.
Allegedly.
Exactly. But either way, it was like we had 4 or 5 months of just one story. Or like the OJ trial. That shit was on TV for like six fucking.
Nonstop.
Yeah, you have like a half a year where everybody knows what they're talking about. Now, like remember the Jews climbed out of their tunnels under New York City like the beginning of this year,
And
January.
we forgot all about it. I forgot about the Jew tunnels.
It was a long fucking time ago. Like so much other shit's happened. Like Donald Trump got shot like what, a month
3 weeks
ago?
ago. A month ago. A month
Old
ago.
news. Old fucking
Gone.
news, dude.
Old
Like
news.
the cycle moves too fast for anyone to like really, I don't know, be able to feel like they can participate in it. And I guess it's because like, okay, if you have a cable news cycle, you have to catch the news right at 6 p.m. Otherwise you miss
Right.
it. Busy, you missed it. So, you know, they can repeat the same story for a whole week and, you know, people will slowly catch it. But if it goes on the internet, like Twitter or whatever, it trends for like a day and a half. And then, like, I don't
Gone.
know, the next thing happens. And maybe we're missing something with all this convenience at our fingertips. And I don't know if it would do us any good if, like, all of our phones were bricked all of a sudden. But I imagine that we would generate a much stronger national identity, even if we were cut off from the country at wide because we didn't have like this stupid fucking device anymore. You know,
Yeah.
just our stories would be slower, our lives would be slower, and we'd focus on like one or two things in a way that's like probably beneficial to us. So obviously, like day one of my dictatorship, I'm gonna shoot a couple satellites out of the sky. We'll watch the Facebook headquarters burn, and I'll gleefully dance in the hellfire. And then after that, we'll all be friends. Of course, that's it. That's my entire
And
presidential.
we'll also get the view and anybody that watches it unironically.
No. We'll leave the view on. It's important for everyone to have a national story. And who better to tell it than Oprah and all the rest of
And
those?
and Whoopi. Who better than Joy Behar and Whoopi to carry our national? Damn, dude, that's some fucking Serb energy if I've ever heard it.
Bro, it is. And don't you fucking forget it, you dirty Bosnian whore.
Dude, rallying behind the view. That's some Serb energy if I've ever seen it, dude. That's
Okay,
just
well, who's going to tell the national story in your stupid Bosnian Republic then if it's not going to be
dude, Chris Cuomo. He's chilling for his Bosnian brother Andrew.
Damn, Chris Cuomo is going to be busy in future Bosnia, man. I'll have to take notes of this, man. But it's okay because I've got Taylor Swift. She will sing things to the Serbian national heart. And beyond that, I've got all of the mid 30s women as well. Like, you really can't compete, man. You think The View is going to be relevant when Taylor Swift is telling them, like, really what's going on? I've got two sides. The View for 50s, Taylor Swift for 30s, and Kanye West dentist can probably manipulate Billie Eilish into getting the women for like 18 to 30. I've got everything, brother.
Yeah, I'm out strategized right now. I really need to regroup.
You've got the 48 to 65-year-old man who maybe has a medical condition. You've got that demographic locked down. Big Pharma's favorite demographic to advertise to.
I've also got like I've got some young tech bros with Elon that they rally
Oh,
behind his, you know what I mean? I've got some money behind mine. Now, a lot of these tech bros are soy boys that will have to outsource their fighting, but they're rich and they can afford mercenaries.
you know what? You might be right, dude. And see, Elon's fun, man. Like, there's a lot of high energy people who listen to Elon. So I feel like this Serbian Bosnian civil war might actually be hard fought. You know, I might control the women and the pocketbooks, but you might end up controlling the husbands, and we'll see who can henpeck who. You know, are the husbands going to stand up and say, "No more. I don't care what Taylor Swift says. It's time we take this country back," or are the women going to just like, "No more sex"? Until you say, I don't fucking know what dumb thing I'm going to sell to the women, but I'm gonna sell them something stupid, brother.
I'm gonna sell 'em something fantastic. It'll be fantastic.
I'll sell them Serbian national pride, dude. I'll sell them stories about how Florida was actually founded by Serbians, and the Spanish have been lying for years about it. And we'll get the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, involved as well. We'll rewrite history as it should be, the Serbian history. And that's what they'll call my presidency, the Serbian history.
A proud history, a great history.
Absolutely, man. As much as we're lamenting people picking sides, I am absolutely picking sides, dude. Um, you know, there's this ancient Chinese curse. Eventually, it says, "May you live in interesting times." And yeah,
It's a
I get
horrible
how.
curse.
Yeah, I get that. I get how it could be a curse, but people forget about like the other side of that, which is living in absolutely boring fucking times. What, you get a job and like houses are easy to buy and food is cheap and getting cheaper. New technology gets invented. Yeah, you're born in the Civil War and then you fly on a jet to go visit your family 40 years later or whenever the fuck
Sounds
they.
pretty nice.
Yeah, boring,
No,
fucking
sounds
dude.
pretty nice.
Civil strife, global wide pandemics that may or may not be real, but no one can agree on. That's fucking fun, man.
Yeah. There's something right there. I mean, on this same kind of like, I don't know, this death of the myth of America, we're in like the death of truth. You know what I mean? I think we're in a post-truth era. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about it because I don't right. And it's this double-edged sword. Where I don't know if it was better when you had a cohesive narrative that we're talking about, like Dan Rathers and Walter Cronkite got on the television, told you what happened in Vietnam today. That's one thing, and it comes with a lot of downsides. But the flip side of that is now no one can agree on anything. I mean, literally nothing. And this is, I mean, I guess this is all just like building up in this like we can no longer agree as Americans and what's our story, right? I have never met like the rise of the internet, so many fucking experts in everything. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It's like everybody's an expert in everything. Everybody knows exactly how to solve the war in Ukraine, and now they're virologists and they could have told you exactly how this happened. And they're also experts in wildfires, even though they've never seen a fucking fire in their life. And they're also experts on cybersecurity. You know what I mean? It's like everybody is now, and what a powerful resume. You know what I mean? It's like I've done nothing
great.
well in my life to claim that I'm an expert at anything, but it must be really nice to be to be somebody that's an expert in so many complex issue. You know, it's like I wish I was smart enough to not only solve international geopolitical conflicts, but also I'm also a public health expert. Even though I'm lecturing a doctor as I check people out at the grocery store. You know what I mean? It's like that must be nice to be so fucking smart that you've got all of these things nailed.
Yeah, our world has lost a lot of depth in very sad ways. And it's very annoying for me sometimes because obviously there's a lot of things I'm like not an expert in, but every now and then I do have like a few things. Like the Japanese yen carry trade unwound like maybe a month ago, or I think it was close to 3 weeks ago. I didn't really say anything on it, but like I've been writing about it for 2 years as like a coming thing. And then I get on Twitter like when it's unwinding, and it's only partially unwound, and all of a sudden there's like 18 million threads of people talking about like, oh, what is a carry trade? What is the Jap? And I'm like, just shut the fuck up, dude. This isn't your lane. Because there's people I go to on Twitter when I want to like read about like global finance and whatnot. There are like a few known accounts that are very good at it. And I'm reading about the guy who is like talking about like train explosions when that train derailed,
Oh, I remember
talking
that.
Jew tunnels when the Jews were climbing out of tunnels. And it's like, if you're talking about everything, I don't want to hear your opinion on anything. Like, that plane crashed in Brazil like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe, yeah, okay. And everyone saw the video, and all of a sudden there's people explaining, like, oh, well, this plane has had a problem with ice on its leading edge and it yaws
Yeah,
too
because
much.
I'm
So
glad there's a lot of ice in Brazil. as they take off from Rio de Janeiro. You know what I mean?
Hold on, dude. It's wintertime in Brazil right now, and they're at elevation. So this is a plane. See, I'm doing it right fucking now. I'm doing it. I'm not a fucking plane expert. Like, it's just it's the worst, dude. I don't want to hear people saying anything about anything except for like one or two things that they pick and they're good at. You know, I want to like you used to read books from the 1400s and it was some monk who decided to be an expert in beetles in Germany, and you know people use his like memoirs as like the starting text for beetleologists or whatever the fuck they call themselves. Well, like that's what people should be. It's just pick one
Right.
fucking thing, man. You can ignore
Yeah.
everything else. Anytime a plane falls out of the sky, you don't have to talk about it. Anytime there's some like weird currency online, you don't have to talk about it. I want to live in that world where everyone has like a sense of depth and also a sense of like I don't know. And I'll stop rambling here, but one of my favorite accounts recently was talking about something on Twitter, and someone was like, "Hey, you said you don't know this guy. He's actually a pretty big dude." It was talking about the vice president elect, JD Vance, and it's like it kind of ruins your credibility if you say you don't know anything about him. And he says like, "I have a high bar for what I'm willing to say I know and don't know." You know, it's fucking burn. It's a great burn because like way too many people are very willing to say they know things that they simply haven't earned opinions about. And
Yeah.
I think the concept of earning an opinion is lost on like a lot of people. Like just because you read about something once doesn't mean you have an opinion. Just because you heard someone use a phrase doesn't mean you're allowed to repeat it. Like you really have to earn your opinions. And it's something I think it turns me into a bit of a pedant sometimes because I hear people saying things and I know where they got it from, and I have to just stop myself from saying anything. I'm just like, oh yeah, no, interesting. Uh-huh. Yeah, tell me more. Like when you said a post-truth society, dude, I wanted to fucking strangle you. But
Oh, really?
I'm not I'm not gonna. It's
Oh,
just
fair enough.
there's so
Um,
many like just little phrases that set me off. And it makes me a terrible person in like a lot of ways
no,
too.
interesting.
You
Um,
know, sometimes you learn words that resonate with you really well. I'm like, why shouldn't you use them? There's no reason that I should be the gatekeeper of words, but here I am.
yeah, interesting. Well, because it's like, what on that, it's like, what would you categorize instead of saying like a post-truth society, right? Because what would you say? And the reason I say that is because it's like now we're into this very deep meta philosophical conversation of like what is truth and how do you know what you know, right? And so I guess like the way that I use that is that when I talk about a post-truth society, it's like there's no longer just consensus on this happened and we can generally believe that it's true. That's what I mean by that. I'm not talking about like the ultimate pursuit of truth and what is, you know what I mean? No metaphysical philosophical.
No, of course, man. And don't let my pedanticness uh think make you think about like choosing like a new word or something.
I
Like
won't.
I wanted to strangle you. That's like my internal thing, and I have to stop myself because I don't have a better word for what's going on than post-truth. I certainly don't have a more efficient word to describe it.
Mm,
And you know how people understand it is up to them. But like me personally, I like I said, I have to fight the urge because every now and then I hear familiar phrases and I'm just like, "Arr!" But like it's like not a it's not a good urge, I would say. But still, there's times it comes out righteously. You know, like people talking about planes falling out of the sky or trains crashing, shit they know nothing about. I'm like, just stop. But you know,
yeah.
words and phrases they set me off too, even though there's nothing wrong with them. You know.
No, that's fair. That's fair. We all have our triggers. Yeah. There's do you want to keep going on these like parallels or have we devolved so much that we should just shift to a different topic?
You know, there was one other topic I did want to talk about today, and it's not really like super related to Yugoslavia, but it's just kind of like the explosion of global conflict, like
Hmm.
worldwide. And I don't know if I was just like ignorant when I was 12 and just didn't know how many different like border wars were ongoing at that time. Because I'm sure there was a lot going on in 2002, but the world seemed peaceful. You know, the only conflicts I remember caring about in the mid 2000s was just Iraq, Afghanistan, and then later on eventually Syria and others. Like I think I only was aware of conflict in the Middle East, nothing else. But right now it feels like there's so much conflict going around everywhere. And one thing that I think has been overlooked by a lot of people in America is this sense that America is a hegemon and America stops things, and like that's not actually totally true because there's a number of conflicts that have kind of escalated since 2022 post Russia's invasion of Ukraine because they had a gigantic sphere of influence that they've suddenly been able to afford less attention to. So, like for instance, before the invasion in Ukraine, there was a coup in Kazakhstan, and Russia went in and actually stopped it and essentially like stabilized Kazakhstan. But this is January of 22, pre-Ukraine. After Ukraine, the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict just kind of escalated. Russia wasn't able to
Right.
abide it in much the same way they would, and Armenia lost territory, like the whole Nagorno-Karabakh, whatever that place is called. It's part of Azerbaijan now. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, they have a conflict. It's still ongoing, actually, like along their borders. People die every now and then. I wouldn't say it's like a super like crazy conflict, but just the fact that like people might die in any given month, they're shooting each other actively. And normally Russia would have been there to say like, hey, no, stop, but they're not. And then like after the Wagner dude had his like
Hmm.
single plane crash, Wagner forces in Central Africa are like no longer active anymore. Suddenly you've got coups in Niger, Mali, Gabon, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone. And then you've got that entire Central African Republic thing where they're like saying fuck you to France, essentially trying to create their own currency and get off the franc, which is supplied to them by the European Central Bank. It's something they've always been like a soft conflict over, but it's stepped up significantly. And like the Wagner Group was there playing a role. Whether you want to say it's a good or bad role, who knows? Now that they're gone, like a bunch of like sectarian like militias have kind of stepped in. And if you look at any country in the Central African region, whether it's Cameroon, the Central African Republic, or another, there's ongoing conflict now with militias that have arisen that weren't there before. Russia's focus on Ukraine has, I think, very much been a detriment to global peace because we haven't considered exactly how much impact Russia has on all of these other places. And like, there's a fuck ton more. I wrote a whole list, but I haven't even like touched bits of it. I mean, there's conflicts that we haven't been aware of. Like we talk about like in our group chat, we're talking about like the Bangladeshi government just
Right.
collapsed a week ago. Prime Minister gets on a
Seemingly out
plane.
of nowhere to us, right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh, fine.
absolutely. And like we stopped caring about it a couple days after it happened because it's not the only one. Like Haiti collapsed like this year, right? Isn't there like prime minister in exile? Wasn't there a
He's
dude
resigned
like
now. Actually, I
yeah,
know that much. He's resigned, but he
like
wasn't when we were
like
talking about it.
yeah, there was like some cannibal dude eating people and running gangs in Haiti, and like nobody is really even talking about it or gives a fuck about it. It's just a thing that's happening. Apparently there's now Tutsi rebels in Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Like that whole thing, the Hutus and the Tutsis is picked up again. Venezuela and Guyana, maybe that shit's gonna happen. Who fucking knows? But it's also part of the BRIC sphere. There's like a new civil war in Ethiopia. I don't know if people are aware, but Ethiopia and Eritrea used to be a country. And then Ethiopia lost a civil war so bad that they could have, like, the entire government could have flipped because the opposing forces took over the capital. But they basically just agreed that, like, here, you guys can have a little bit of land on the coastline. And Ethiopia got to be a country still. And Ethiopia lost its navy after that, which is fucking hilarious in my mind. Like they lost all of their ports and their navy just kind of sailed around for like 5 or 6 years. Like the Yemenis were like giving them food and oil and whatnot, but like they had nowhere to go. And eventually they just scuttled the ships once they got so old and rusty that they couldn't even sail, which is a hilarious thing to have happen. But because of that, like Ethiopia made an agreement with like Somaliland, which is not a real country because it's part of Somalia, but Ethiopia's government's like, hey, we'll recognize you as a country if you let us use your port. So now
Right.
Ethiopia has a navy in Somalia that Somalia doesn't want them to have. And it's like the weirdest conflict ever because, like, again, the whole Horn of Africa get involved. And Ethiopia just joined BRICS. Like, I mean, these are a bunch of nations that could be in like the Russian sphere. And Russia's just too busy with Ukraine to like broker any sort of peace. And, we look around at like the failings of the US to broker peace in like a number of different places, like the obvious ones Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Yemen, Iraq. That shit's like popping up again. Maybe Taiwan and China. But I think we forget the role that Russia has and like what we could be setting ourselves up for. Who knows? Are we going to see like a World War III or something in the near future? While the U.S. at the same time can't decide like what our own national identity is. Like, could we be useful in that sort of scenario, or would we be too busy looking up our own asses to actually help anyone? I don't know, but it's an interesting topic, and I'm curious if anything there like grabs you or
Yeah, there's so much that grabs me. I would like to mute myself for a
oh,
second. I need to sneeze and blow my nose furiously.
don't
So
mute, let
can
them
I
hear.
take like two and be right
Don't
back?
don't mute, let them hear.
I
No, no,
won't.
no, go for it, dude.
I won't. All right.
I'll talk randomly while you're gone, man.
All right.
But for those of y'all listening, one of the conflicts that I find the most interesting right now is on the island of Cyprus. Many people don't know that essentially Cyprus is split in half. Half of it's occupied by Turkey, half of it's occupied by Greece. And Greece and Turkey have been feuding over this and a number of other islands over the last couple of years. And recently, UN peacekeepers, like literally last year, were attacked in Cyprus. And the Greek and Turkish Air Force and Coast Guard have been getting into like mild skirmishes. They're not shooting at each other, but they're like flying and sailing into each other's territory and just kind of like posturing because they totally disagree about who owns what in the Aegean. And it could pop off. And it's like a big deal too because Turkey right now is part of the UN along with Greece. Like they technically are not allowed to get into a conflict with each other, but who makes the rules on the global stage? Anyone can get to a conflict with anyone else for any reason. And if they did, who knows what side Turkey might pick? Would they look to BRICS for help? Would they look to BRICS for assistance? Would they maybe not help out in UN issues? During the Ukraine conflict, Finland and whoever the fuck the other country was in Scandinavia, totally irrelevant, were trying to join the UN. And for a long time, Turkey was holding out on the vote just because they wanted concessions of their own. We think Turkey is in our sphere, but like realistically, they're half and half. And with them holding out on that vote, they were essentially assisting Russia through a good chunk of 2023. But it's tough to look at it that way because we assume they're our allies in the UN. But anyways, Matt, I'll let you talk about whatever has grabbed you out of this.
Yeah, so something that jumps out to me is as you go into these details, it's the idea of the long peace and the geopolitical chessboard that was set up in a post World War II world, especially as soon as you get atomic bombs. Then those atomic bombs become thermonuclear bombs. We have a specific view when we look at the world as Americans and how America plays, I guess, police or referee in a lot of scenarios. But what we fail to account for is the amount of benefit that Russia and China play. And so, like, just think of like the UN Security Council. Think of the UN Security Council. So you have this idea, you need consensus. If you want the UN to mobilize and go anywhere and intervene in a country, especially with arms, you want consensus. And even though the UN Security Council hasn't been effective at that, individually they are. And I wonder what happens, right? Like, I think that what we're seeing is the effects of what happens when both the United States and Russia are too busy with their own regional or internal problems to play referee for the world. Now, sometimes that's not good, but I think that once again, like we no longer have a consensus on media. It's not good that Russia is completely involved in Ukraine because now we start to see some very blaring and blatant um, you know problems with when they're not in the realm, and same with America. And so I guess what really jumps out to me is like, where do we go from here as an international community if you have all of these regional conflicts? And I think the world's probably always been a little hot, you know what I mean? Back to your point where maybe just we weren't paying attention. There's always conflicts going on. I've talked to, I have some pretty interesting friends that are retired and they tell me stories about, oh, we were here. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't remember us ever deploying there. And it's like, well, we didn't, but we were there. You know what I mean? And so there's always those stories and there's always that aspect of us being involved. But I think that if you either, in America's case, lose your national identity, like what is it to be American, or your effort is focused on an incursion in Ukraine, well, the rest of the world is free to do as they please. And I just wonder what the effects of this are, because regional conflicts often can escalate, right? And there's something that Otto von Bismarck, and if this is off topic, stop me, because I don't. But Otto von Bismarck talked about, if there was ever going to be a general war in Europe, it was going to pop off because some damn bloody event in the Balkans. Like he understood that, well, if Germany and France go to war, it's probably going to be not because of us, or if you know what I mean, if Russia and Britain mobilize against us, and it's going to be because of the fucking Balkans. And that is a really good example of how a regional war can escalate, right? A peer-to-peer conflict, or better yet, a insurgency versus a occupier, right? Because that's how you can really put it. The Black Hand, they're tired of we're tired of being Austrian, so we shot the Archduke, and now before well, cool. Now that well, Russia's involved. Oh, great. Now Germany's involved. Oh, great. France and Britain's involved. Oh, this is wonderful. And you have 20 million people dead in 4 years because of some damn bloody event in the Balkans. And I say that to draw parallels to some of these smaller regional conflicts that have the potential to escalate. I don't know about like the Horn of Africa. That's a problem because if you think that prices are bad now, wait till the Suez Canal gets shut down. You know what I mean? There's a lot of these seemingly uninteresting or conflicts that couldn't affect us, that would have radical impacts on our day-to-day lives that we just don't understand. But I mean, the obvious one is Israel and Gaza, Israel and Palestine, and the implications of having Iran, assassinations of Israel outside of their sovereign territory. How many incursions can you have until Iran or Hezbollah or any of their numerous proxies just say, we've had enough? And now Israel strikes back. Now America's obligated, or we have to decide, do we actually care about our strategic ally in the Middle East or not? Most likely we will. You know what I mean? And so all of a sudden that you can have something as seemingly uninteresting as the assassination of the second in command of Hamas in Iran. Well, great. Now we're shooting at each other. And it's it needs to be considered that any of these wars where you have America and Russia on opposite sides, or China, you have the the Russian Sino axis versus the West axis. Anytime that we're on opposite sides, there's always the potential for this to escalate into a broader war. And we've seen that in the past, right? And we've done marvelous dances to avoid it. And like you take the Korean War, for example, it is a conflict that, for all intents and purposes, should have been World War III. You have American and British and French and Australian troops shooting at Chinese and Russian troops, and everybody is desperate to not call it a war, because if it's not a war, then maybe we don't have to fight it like a war. You have the reporter that asked Truman, "Are we at war in Korea?" He's like, "No, this is a police action." And Song goes, "This is great. It is a police action, because now I don't have to fight a war, and I can say, no, we're not. This isn't a police action. We're just helping. We're just aiding pilots to this police action on our own part." And I wonder if the geopolitical finesse that realpolitik developed in the 20th century is now lost on these dunsical human beings. Did any of that make sense?
It did, and it's something I think about often because as much as sometimes you see quotes from people in the State Department and it's just like god awful. Like I walked in always hoping there'd be another room with adults in it, and I had to realize I'm the adults. And that was scary. Like I don't want to hear that from you if you're negotiating on my behalf with the rest of the world. But at the same time, all of this shit is going on, and so far nothing has popped off yet, which
Fair.
is like heartening in some sense as well. Because there's 10 million different places where the lines could be very easily drawn. Even just the Venezuela and Essequibo, I can't say it, the part of Guyana, like even that, like Venezuela is, aligned with BRICS. And after the recent election of Maduro election, and the U.S. is coming out and saying like, yeah, we don't actually recognize the government anymore. We believe the election was fraudulent. Meanwhile, Russia, China, and Iran have all recognized Maduro as the government. Something as simple as that could pop off into like a global conflict, and somehow we have gotten lucky that either Maduro hasn't decided to move, or maybe he can't move. Like maybe they lack the wherewithal. The last time I looked at like Venezuelan forces, they had like one helicopter that was working. And their most recent naval engagement, they lost it against a cruise line, like literally a like Royal Caribbean ship. They tried to ram it. I don't know fucking why, because those things are like the size of like 18
They're
city blocks.
huge.
Fucking gigantic, man. But they tried to ram it with one of their Coast Guard boats, and their Coast Guard boat sunk. And so that's the last official conflict the Venezuelan armed forces have gotten in. So like maybe they just lack the resources to move on Guyana effectively, because the only way they could move really is like a ground assault. But there are no roads, and it's just straight jungle. So like, you can't ground assault that. That's retarded. Like there's barely even any villages in that area of Guyana. And when I say villages, I'm talking about like native Amazonian tribes. They've got maybe some semi-complex huts set up, maybe an irrigation system to, bring water to 160 people, but not enough that an army could walk through and like draw any sort of supplies. So we might just be lucky that the whole Venezuela situation can't pop off, but it's one where like the
Right.
lines have been drawn like very easily. I was talking about Cyprus earlier while you were sneezing and blowing your nose, and like that's another one. Like it's Turkey versus Greece. They've split the island in half.
Both
They've been
NATO allies.
Yeah, exactly. But Turkey recently in the whole like I said UN like 10 million times while you're gone. I meant NATO the entire time. I always get the two mixed up out loud and
Fair
verbally.
enough.
Um, but like Turkey was withholding on like the vote for Finland to join NATO when they were trying to join and become another state bordering Russia. Turkey has some grievances with NATO. It could very easily be that they split with NATO over their territorial dispute with Greece for certain islands and maritime borders. And those maritime borders just happen to include offshore oil and gas, as they always do. But there's like 10 million of these little things where lines could be drawn so easily, sides could be picked so easily, and they just haven't for some reason or the other. Like Israel and Iran, it's the easiest one. Iran, BRICS allies, Russia, allied with Russia and China in the conflict. They're receiving support from Russia, even though we have the whole trade embargo with them. We have a trade embargo with Russia too, so it doesn't matter. But even before Russia's trade embargo, like they were trading with Iran, fully supporting that side. Like that could pop off and they could pick sides. But for whatever reason, the Ayatollah saw his shadow and was like, we're not going to attack Israel today, after saying he's going to do it a million times. And we should be grateful for that as like people, regardless of how we feel about Israel and like genocide
Mm.
or like Israel's like sabotage of other nation states and you know what they're doing behind the scenes. Like we should still be grateful that they weren't attacked, because who knows how it could have impacted our lives. I mean, like, I feel like we're dancing on the head of a pin, and every day we happen to put our feet in the exact right spot, somehow, some way. Um, and it's kind of beautiful. So at some point we will
It
be
is
witnessing
nice.
times, but so far interesting times have decided they're only going to partially manifest.
Right.
We
Well,
have had a
no,
full.
there's something to that. I'm also reminded of Bertrand Russell's quote: "It is reasonable to expect a man to walk a tightrope for 5 minutes. It is even it is far unreasonable to expect him to walk one for 200 years. And that's when, like, when I go back to this idea of the long peace, right? How long does it hold up? Because I think that you have a general understanding of leaders of countries that a general global war is horrible for everybody. You know, you always have some sects and some factions that are always, you know, that will always be warmongers. But I think overall, maybe the reason things haven't popped off is because leaders of the nation, you know, leaders of these nations are like, well, you know, like we can saber rattle over Taiwan, but we actually don't want to go into a general global war with the United States that draws Russia in, because now you have a bunch of nuclear armed countries actively shooting at each other. And if this is a war, then we have to fight like a war, which means total victory, and we have to use the weapons of war, and now everybody's dead, you know. And maybe, you know, it's the benefit of the nuclear bomb, but what happens if deterrence fails, right? Because the entire world of the long peace is built on the fact, well, everybody that you want to attack has enough weapons to nuke you back to the Stone Age, and they can, you know, fire a salvo to reprise against you in the same manner. And so, like, we all just sit around and it's like, oh, I guess we'll just deal with it. But what happens if deterrence fails? And that's a very interesting question that we should probably be thinking about. And something that Dan Carlin said in one of his podcasts that I don't understand why more people like, I don't why this hasn't gotten like popular traction. But he says that since 1945, every time Americans go to the poll, they're voting for the world's most dangerous human being. And we refuse to phrase it in that manner. It's like you're telling about somebody that has the unilateral, unconstitutional ability to destroy the world in 8 minutes if they choose to. Maybe you should put some thought into who that person is. But no, it's like, as he says, he's like, well, the Democrats are weak on communists and we're damn close on taking back the house. You know what I mean? And you get all these weird internal politics. And it is fascinating because you are right. We have managed to dance on the head of this pin for years. But the question that I always wonder and think that we should be asking is like, well, what happens if we miss our feet? Because it can be as something as simple as the Archduke's driver taking a wrong turn down a narrow street in Sarajevo, and 4 years later, 20 million people are dead. You know, it like sometimes, you know what I mean? Like missing the head of the pin, you don't have to have like China invade Taiwan. Sometimes you just have to have somebody in the wrong place at the wrong time and things spiral out of control. And I was looking at this map. Well, I have a friend that did a stint in the Army Rangers, and he always just said TIA. This is Africa.
Yeah.
Anytime we talk about Africa, he's just like TIA, dude. And you know
Yeah.
he spent some time there, and it's I'm looking at the map and it's like Africa's always been violent, before, during, and after colonialization. um, but I think what strikes me the most about this map is that you have peer-to-peer conflicts, especially in Eastern Europe. Those are the ones I think that escalate. I don't know how Africa actually has a long-term effect on global security because we've always been shooting each other in Africa, and we've always been fine with Africans shooting Africans. You know, it's a there was a I think it was the UN Secretary General or whoever was deployed. The actual general on the ground for the UN peacekeeping force at when the Rwanda genocide happens, and he lamented in his memoirs. He was just like Rwanda was too black for the world to care about, and
Ah,
so
fair.
I have I have my eye on things like Turkey and Greece, things like Israel, Iran, its proxies. People forget that India and China don't get along. You know, you know what I mean? You have two nuclear armed countries that are vying for, you know, their own regional homogeny, and we always forget about that one. So I don't know. It's a fascinating world. I just hope that people think just just a sliver before they advocate for things that they don't understand. I mean, maybe that's the theme of this whole story. You know what I mean? It's like people are like, oh, I want national divorce. It's like, well, you can have it, but it might not be in the way that you want. So think long and hard about what you pray for. You know what I mean? I remember my grandma always told me that growing up. She's like, be careful about what you pray for because you might just get it.
Well, I'm going to toss a gigantic wrench out of what you just said. I wonder, we've never really experienced a nuclear war before. What if it's actually not that bad? You know? What if?
There's that's a possibility. I guess it would depend on the details of it. So that do you know who Annie Jacobson is?
No, I don't think
Uh,
so.
she's an author. She's written some really interesting books. They all revolve around the American security apparatus. I'm listening to one of her books called Operation Paperclip right now, which she's like an investigative journalist, but she wrote a book that probably a New York Times bestseller, if I had to guess. It's called Armageddon, a scenario in which you have this like bolt out of the blue strike, as she calls it, of you just like two missiles, one from a sub, one from a land-based rocket, launched in North Korea to America, and the ensuing chaos that happens. And in her book, well, we're all dead in 90 minutes. And there's a quote from Khrushchev that she puts at the start of it. She goes, I think the quote something along the lines of, "In the event of a total nuclear war, the survivors will envy the dead," or something along those lines. Because if you live through the initial bomb blast and fallout, well, then what follows is even worse. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never explored the concept of like, what if it's not so bad? Only because if you dive into like we don't have a. I think Dan Carlin puts it. He does a great job at, you know, um, taking the stories of Nagasaki and Hiroshima and putting them in the context where he just reads these horrific after horrific after horrific account. I mean, things that make you want to cry, things that make you want to vomit because they're just so descriptive. And he goes, you need not, you only need to replace these people's stories with the faces and names of the ones that you love in a general nuclear war. And there you go. And
So,
so, no, I don't know.
what,
It's depends, I guess. If you live on the outskirts of Nagasaki, I guess it's not so bad. I
so
mean, I guess it I don't know.
the one reason I asked this question is because there's this Venn diagram that goes around on Twitter every time anything like really bad happens. And in one box is the word apocalypse. In the other box is having to go to work. And there's that little sliver in the middle where it still like covers up. And I feel like if we had a nuclear like collapse or a nuclear war or whatever, um, your apartment still wants rent, your bank still wants the mortgage, the grocery store is still somehow supplying non-irradiated food on the shelves. Maybe they've got a sale on iodine tablets at Walmart. Like, there's
Or
something off
they're price
about the way
gouging.
this. Oh yeah, the price gouging. Why is my radiation medicine $90 here, but it's only $2 in India? This is ridiculous. But this country has this awful way of just never stopping. And
Mm.
I feel like if we were hit by a nuke, somehow life would keep going. You drive past like irradiated zones of the city. Maybe there's a 2-for-1 sale on those like fallout things you wear. Maybe your apartment installs one of those like little showers at the entrance. So before you come in, you have to shower off and take off your suit. Like, this country is just so bad about just keeping on going. And I feel like that's what would happen. Like, we get hit by a nuke and people are like, it's not so bad. They'd figure out some way to still like, I bet the Vikings would still lose. We would still suck as a team, but we'd be playing. And that'd be like the worst part about it, man. Like, I think every time anyone pictures like a nuclear apocalypse, they're wandering around with a bolt action rifle, and they've got like a motorcycle, and that's it. It's fucking, what's that Denzel Washington movie where he's like
Oh,
blind, but you don't The Book of Eli.
Yeah,
You know,
that's it.
people think it's going to be that, but it's not. It's going to be like putting spreadsheets together, and your favorite bar is closed, but your boss still calls you at 7 p.m. And I think
Yeah,
that's going to be the real tragedy of a nuclear war is just
yeah.
that end.
That we're all the Taliban post victory.
Exactly, man. Exactly. The living envy the dead. That's going to be our fate. And some people might look
That's
at it as a victory, but I'm going to
I
look at it
guess
like a
that's
loss.
yeah, I guess it just depends on the scope of, you know what I mean? Like if there's a nuclear bomb, that's probably what happens, but I guess just like knowing what's been declassified about the Americas, like America's got like a launch on warning um policy so that if you get a nuclear detection, you're supposed to launch a salvo and depending, you know what I mean? It's like they described the football that's carried by the president's aide as kind of a Wendy's list of Armageddon, is how one guy described it, where he's just like, well, you can select something from section A and then section B and section C, and then at the end of it we can tally up who needs to launch what. So I guess it just depends on the severity of it. We could probably deal with one nuclear strike, right? Like the government will continue to function, but I don't know, like if there's 50 land in America, you know what I mean? Like at what point does society break down? I don't know. It's a very interesting question. I hate to imagine the dystopian hellhole that you just painted for me, that like now we have to like Jesus Christ, dude, I still have to like pay my taxes to the IRS, even though like DC's been effectively decapitated by a strike on the Pentagon. Well,
The
by God,
bureaucrats figure
those
out.
87,000 IRS agents weren't all in the Pentagon or around Ground Zero. And you owe Uncle Sam your taxes.
Absolutely awful, dude. I remember working during Hurricane Harvey, and it was just like thinking back on it now, it was like super dystopian because like obviously my internet was out. It was just raining nonstop. There was someone dead in the building across the street. I didn't find out until like after. But like they went in the elevator down to the basement, and like the elevator door opened, and all the water rushed in because it was flooded, and she just died in the elevator.
Oh, that's
Because as
that's a
soon
terrible way to
right?
die.
The worst way ever. But there I am, like pounding away at spreadsheets. I was tethered to my phone for like internet connection, and I'd plug in my laptop whenever the power is on just to charge it up, and then we'd lose the power, and I would just be like tethered on my phone. I was like working the entire time. The entire time I was joining meetings and whatnot, and the only thing I couldn't do was like we needed things like in the servers at our office, and then people were like on my case. It's like, well, why can't you guys just deliver it today? And I'm like, bro, I don't know if you've seen the news, but our office is like a couple feet underwater, man. like, like I think you would understand if I didn't join this call, but here I am. And I'm just imagining a bunch of people like me during like a nuclear holocaust being like, well, look, only half of the city was nuked. You know, not the part I live in. So here I am, still at work. You call AT&T, report an outage. I bet they show up, man. Like just and people think
What?
this is some picture of like American grit and survivalism, but it's just awful, man. I want the country to leave me alone for a little bit, and you'll
Hmm.
never get it, man.
No, that's
This is
actually
not
that's
the Day of the
actually a
Dead.
very interesting picture that you paint, and I actually hate it, to be fair.
Right? It's worse than just getting roasted in the fireball.
It is. Yeah, no, dying in the nuclear explosion's easy. That would make sense. But
Absolutely,
somehow there being like enough essential services up and running that the world tries to function. Yeah,
it's awful.
that is awful. I wonder what that threshold is, because we all know that the threshold for civilization is very, very low. You know what I mean? It only takes a couple of days without food and water before, well, your neighbors turn on you, as we've, been talking about this whole time. And I wonder what, yeah, I wonder how the country is going to deal. And I think we can end on like some of these like larger questions. Like, I wonder how the country is going to deal with the political instability of 2024, because I go back and forth about two differing opinions, and I'm not sure which one I actually believe in. Part of me says it does not matter. Whoever wins, the presidential election. The world will keep on spinning. America will keep on spinning. We will continue to just be Americans and go on about our dystopian late stage capitalist lives. The other part of me, it's like, well, it doesn't matter who wins because there's going to be political violence because neither side is going to be willing to accept the results of a presidential election. And so now we're all just going through the motions until we start shooting each other. And I don't know which narrative I believe in because both are equally as plausible to me.
Yeah, and I have no idea what's going to happen either next year. There's a bunch of people who say they know, and like, I don't know. No matter what side wins, I just can't really picture anything good happening for the most part. Like they're rioting at the DNC like right now. They tore down the
Oh, are
walls
they?
outside. Yeah, yeah. There was like a video. The video could have been AI. Who knows? But like it's plausible, believable. Apparently they all had permits to protest around the entire DNC. And there was a wall. They're arresting people. The police were like throwing tear gas and had shields and whatnot. But I didn't watch too much because I hopped on here. Like who fucking cares, really? But that kind of like just low level protest energy everywhere. I feel like it's just not going to go away no matter who wins, and we're just going to have to deal with the inconvenience. Like the George Floyd riots, those were like another awful thing to work through. Because I live basically downtown, and like they destroyed my Verizon store. It's like right over there. It was bricked up. I had to go to a different one, but I've switched to AT&T since then. But like it was fucking annoying. And then like I'm black, so like I get on like our calls, and my boss is like, I just want to take you aside for a couple minutes and talk about how awful this is. And I was just like, yeah, bro, I
Spare me.
know. I couldn't get on my flight. I was supposed to be taking this call in Montana because it was 2020, man. We just
Yeah.
go wherever we want, and I was just cooped up in my apartment instead. But still, it was just annoying. I wish they had just given us like a day off to like process our feelings instead of like telling us what our opinion should have been about it by just assuming.
What they
Um,
should be.
yeah, and like our office was downtown. Now that I think about it, I have no idea if it got destroyed because like I never set foot in the office in 2020 at all because of like COVID lockdown nonsense. They had it open for us if you wanted to go, but like why on earth would anyone?
Right.
You don't have to go. You're not going, of course. But I don't know, man. There's so many times you wish people would pull the plug, but they're just insensitive to the demands of the working individual. you know? Just pay me and don't ask me to do anything. That's all we really want, man. I'll pray that if we do get bombed with nuclear bombs, that the president's just like UBI, but there's nothing to buy. Pay your rent. you know, I could live with
Oh,
that. Just don't ask me to do
oh
the work.
man. What horrors await us? You know
I
what I mean?
promise.
It's like you've painted this entirely different narrative because some of the images that and it's probably tainted, right? Like let me expose my own biases. It is tainted by studying like the worst of the worst. What happens, when nation states break down, or what happens when you have peer-to-peer conflicts and it kills 70 million people in the span of 6 years. Like that's like I've spent most of my studies and energy on that, but you painted this whole different area of just hell that I've never imagined. It's like what happens if services are definitely interrupted, but not enough to stop the flow of your day-to-day life, and you must just persevere through the nonsense. It's just like could you it's like almost like a city. It makes me wonder if you could have a teleporter and go back and you ask people, like, how did Japan handle the first atomic bombing, right? So like Hiroshima just got new in on whatever morning at 9 a.m. in the blink of an eye, like 30,000 people just got vaporized. You know what I mean? They got turned into shadows. And then another 20,000 are going to die these horrific deaths in the fire. And then you're going to have like another 50,000 over the next one day to couple years die of horrible radiation sick. Like, what did Japan do for the rest of the day? She's like, oh well,
Well,
they
there is
just
one story actually, which
they
is
just turned the city into it's like they just turned people into carbon. I guess I'll go to the factory and make paper.
Have you heard the story of the dude who was in both of those
I
explosions?
have.
Do you know
I
why
have.
he was going to the second city?
I don't.
He was going to work after he was in the first atomic bomb.
Oh
He's
my
like, I better
god.
get on the train and go to work.
Oh, dude, you gotta
It's
be
the
fucking
exact
kidding me.
same shit, man. He's just lucky his office got hit in blast, man. So fucking lucky. Otherwise, he would have had to keep going to work every fucking day. That's what I hated so much about Harvey afterwards, because like they wanted us to work and they also wanted us to like help with the office, help clean things
So
up, and
you
like
can't do both.
oh no, you did. We did. And one of our coworkers, his house got hit, and like for the insurance, they needed to like prep it and like remove the drywall below a certain line, like the water line or whatever. And he asked if we'll go help him after work, and like I'm a good person, so I went. But I was so fucking pissed the entire goddamn time. There's nothing worse. Like it would have been better if the hurricane just knocked his house down. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. Instead, it was just mildly destroyed, enough that it needed hands and the insurance. There wasn't enough people around to do it in time. So we had to do it if we were good employees. Same. I wish the office was knocked over. Instead, it was just water damage and the elevators were destroyed. So we had to walk up to the ninth floor every single day to get things out of it and then deal with the server room, all this other nonsense that we had to fix. Like, disasters are never as bad as they need to be. That's
Hmm.
really the thing. And for America, this could be about our resilience, but they just need to be so awful that I don't think it's possible to really stop us.
Mm.
Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. From my perspective, as an American who has to do things here, it's bad. But from the perspective of someone like watching or someone who depends on like these essential services and people to go to the grocery store and whatnot, it's probably good. Like people got to go to Waffle House, and I guarantee you, Waffle House will be open in the fucking like irradiated landscape. They'll figure out some way to feed you.
You know
It's
they
just,
will. You know they will. I mean, dude, FEMA has adopted the Waffle House Index, where
mhm.
where if Waffle Houses are closed, they know it's like, well, this is terrible. It's like we need to deploy the National Guard, like a Waffle House is shut down.
Absolutely. Every prepper is going to be so disappointed. They're ready. They've got all their food. They've got all their water, and their boss is going to send them an email at 8:30. It's like, hey, I read over the PowerPoint, and there's a couple slides you need to fix. I'm hoping you can get to them tonight because we still have our call
Because
scheduled
we have
tomorrow.
a because because we still have a deadline for
Right?
this
And
project, dude.
you're sitting there with all
I
your prep food. I've got my camp stove in the other room. I've got like 8 months of food ready. Nope, 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 nope. You still got to come to work, man. I'm never
Starlink's
going to
still
get to
up.
live my dark secrets of shit hidden fan survival. I'm never going to get to join
That's
a gang that's roving through the city, murdering people over their jewelry. I'm never going to get to have any of that fun. It's going to be
never.
spreadsheets time, man. But I'll stop ranting.
Damn. Don't even get
Extending.
to enjoy like your Mad Max. Dude, like how dare they rob us of our Mad Max arc?
Absolutely, dude. Like the zombies will
There's
come, and we'll figure out some way to commoditize them too.
we probably will. There what you're talking about, like it's like you need the disaster to be terrible. I think about oh, what's his name? Curtis LeMay. Um, he was like he was like a bomber colonel in Germany, cut his teeth, yada yada, becomes like leader of Strategic Air Command and leader like the entire nuclear arsenal via the Air Force. And he talks about the Korean War, where the most humane thing that we could do is fight the most horrific war that we can, because every day that it prolongs, more people die. And he was very upset about the American policy in Vietnam because he's just like, well, people like MacArthur advocated to nuke it, and Truman said no, but it didn't stop us from burning down every village in North Korea between the border of South Korea and our front lines. He's like, all those people still got displaced. They all still died, but instead of like in this like flash of nuclear light that ended the war in a day, they all died over 3 years. And so he was a large advocate of, the most humane way to fight a war is the most inhumane way possible, so that it ends quickly. And there's something to that.
Absolutely. A bunch of small bombs are bad news, but one big bomb, that might be some good news depending on where it lands.
It's a good point. I mean, it's a really good point. because it's not, it's like, not to say, because yeah, like when we drop the atomic bomb, that's not a new occurrence. Like we're wiping cities off the face of the map at like an alarming rate. You know what I mean? By like July of 1945, dude, the American war machine is rolling. We are obliterating cities in
Absolutely.
Japan.
And you
And
know
it,
what's
and it, and
interesting?
it-
So
yeah,
I
go ahead.
didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
I don't think like Russia or China or any of like our major adversaries are actually really prepared to target the right things with a nuke. You know, they'd go for like our production buildings. So like here in Houston, they'd probably bomb the port and our refineries. Like, this will interrupt their ability to make oil. But like, really, a good chunk of the mortgages here are underwritten within like 6 blocks of downtown Houston. I can tell them like, hey, hit here with the bomb. You'll actually stop us. But they'll go for production facilities, and the banks will underwrite a new loan, and they'll figure out funding, they'll figure out a construction site, they'll build a team of engineers, they'll get everyone together, and the war machine will go right on. Like I think China and Russia genuinely don't know exactly how our society is organized, just around money, cheap money, and loans. And if they really were forward thinking, they could actually like stop me from going to work, but they aren't, unfortunately, and that's the real tragedy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Well, because I'll say this, and then I think we can end because now we're just like detouring off
Yeah.
into whatever. The lessons, like Curtis LeMay is actually a very fascinating character of history. I don't know if he's a good guy, and I don't know if he's a bad guy either. But one of the things that when he took over, he took over from what was dubbed the bomber mafia, which was this kind of like intellectual idea of how you're supposed to humanely fight a war from the air. And when he took over the Pacific Theater, the first thing that he did, which you're talking about, like if you're going to tear down a wall, understand why I say it. So the very first thing that he did is he flew like 5 or 10 missions the way that the old guy in command had been flying, just to see. Right? He's just like he's been flying him. I got to see like are these really problems or are they not? And at the end of this experiment, he goes, well, yeah, they are problems. So because they essentially like the short version is they are encountering the airstream, which is now this new discovery because of the B-29, and we're flying a little bit higher than we ever have before, and so we're dropping bombs, and it's like, oh wow, there's this crazy jet of air that makes bombing from this altitude like extremely inaccurate, and so, well, if we can't actually target, with this Norden bomb site, this very secret and protective and innovative piece of equipment that we can humanely bomb the enemy, by targeting their industry. Well, we can't drop it from there. So now we've got to go low. Well, if we go low, well, we can't fly in the day because now we're sitting ducks. So we've got to fly at night. Well, if we're going to fly at night, we can't use the Norden bomb site because we can't see the target. So I guess we're firebombing cities now. You know what I mean? And
That's a great
and it's
progression.
and it's this fascinating, like I don't know, like it's a fascinating progression of somebody who's trying. It's like, well, this is how I've been told I have to fight the war, but this isn't working. And so it's like, I guess we're firebombing at Tokyo at night now, because the way that you've told me to fight the war doesn't work. And it's a super fascinating progression of, I don't know, the pragmatism, because, and I say that because sometimes I wonder, like, do you have to have a war and a prolonged war to get to that conclusion, right? Because the American air theory in World War II was like, no, we fly in the day and we have precision bombing because we're not butchers and we don't kill civilians. And the British are like, dude, you guys are fucking maniacs. Why are you flying daytime sorties against the Germans further than your fighters can, intercept the, you know what I mean? And well, there's, you have like the Schweizberg incident where, like the bloody 100, like no planes, you know what I mean? There's all of these horrific stories of just B-17 crews sacrificed to the war gods, and the British are like, no, that's why we night bomb. And you need, and like you need the progression of 4 years of war until Curtis LeMay comes around with his cigar, and now it's like, no, this is why we firebomb Tokyo, and everybody sits around and is like, yeah, okay, copy that, understand.
Well, I guess I'll tie that in with the book because, like, that's one thing that came out in this book again. Dark Secrets of Shit Hits the Fan Survival, is that he said he lost his morality and only had common sense. So he was doing awful things because it was like the best choice for him in any given scenario. And he came to this conclusion fairly quickly during the siege, while others who didn't come to that conclusion ended up dying. He was able to survive the entire 4 years, basically in a city besieged with no food, and only the rainwater they could collect, in the middle of a fucking war zone. And when you ask that question about militaries, like how soon can we actually course correct to being commonsensical, even if we're not being moral? I guess it depends, and that's every man's decision to make for himself. So when the nukes drop and your boss asks you to show up to work early, know that you can make the decision yourself. You don't have to show up to the office. Tell them no.
Just say no. Channel your channel your inner Nancy Reagan, dude. Just say no.
Absolutely. And I will sign off by saying one thing. You never know what day the bombs are going to drop. So each day they don't, you should cherish them. And you should send your boss a message on Teams and tell them that you love them. Because one day you might not be able to because Teams will be down.
Wow, what a mess. I thought you're going to go in the classic, one day was the last day that you lived in a pre-apocalyptic world and you just didn't know it. I thought that's where that was going.
Oh, that would have been a classic for Flirt Cheap quote. I would have enjoyed making that one. But I don't know. I enjoy reminding people that their boss-employee relationship is temporal and all things end. Dust in the wind after all, brother. Tell them you love them, man.
Well, I think on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Fair enough. Everyone, it was nice talking to you tonight. I hope you'll have a wonderful week.
That's very, very positive of you. Hope you guys have horrible weeks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So horrible they don't have to go to work.
I don't wish that upon anybody. All right, we'll see you guys later.